If there was a last lecture for the next generation of manufacturing leaders, corporate leaders, what would you want them to hear? What are some hard-earned truths that you would love to pass along?
Yeah, so I think it centers around delivering results. There's one thing that people realize is that results matter. And results can be driven from action, but action have got to deliver results. You just don't necessarily do really good actions and not deliver results and actually have a good outcome.
Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Direct Application. I'm your host, Matt Harrington. Thank you so much for joining us. Every month, we try and sit down with leaders who aren't just talking strategy, but they're actually applying it. Whether you're leading a nonprofit, managing a factory, or navigating change in a legacy system, this show gives you some of the direct tools, hopefully, to lead forward. And so I'm very excited to share another interview with you. My guest today is going to be Chuck Hollingsworth, a manufacturing operations leader with over 4 decades of experience across Coca-Cola, Keurig Dr Pepper. He's led supply systems with more than 100 plants and 350 distribution centers. And recently, he's been on the front lines of launching a new state-of-the-art facility in the Carolinas, during COVID, no less. From autonomous teams to AI in manufacturing, Chuck brings big ideas down to the floor, where people, process, and product actually meet. I actually met Chuck over 10 years ago. He was working at Coca-Cola. My firm got called in to do self-directed autonomous work teams for him. And over that time, our relationship built. And then he moved up to Keurig Green Mountain, up here in the Green Mountain state of Vermont, and was looking to implement teaming there. And so we went up to Keurig for a couple of years and did that as well. And so it was great to reconnect with him after 10 years, see how he was doing, see where he was at during the Keurig. And we've got some big news to share even from Keurig as you watch this interview. So without further ado, let's hop on to the interview as I catch up with my old friend, Chuck. So great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Matt. Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, so we got to start off by, you and I are both coffee lovers. We come from the coffee world. What's new in the coffee world? What are you working on in there that you might be able to share with our audience? And what's kind of a picture of the future here?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, some big breaking news that we just heard this past week and weekend is how Keurig Dr Pepper just purchased JD Dow Egberts over in Europe. And that gives us a huge global presence in the coffee world. So that's really exciting. Still a lot of details to come on that, but some really, really neat things. And then the second one is what we have launched this year into a home use test. It's called our K-Round product, which is basically a podless compressed coffee pod. And it will basically enable us to do a lot more with our coffee. It'll also enable us to bring in a lot more consumers that currently don't enjoy or don't want to participate in the K-Cup side of the coffee world. And this gives us the opportunity to really embark on that. And, lastly, with that K-Round, it gives the opportunity to make a true espresso, which is really, really exciting for the coffee business and for the single serve business.
Yeah. I remember back in the day when we were doing some work with Keurig, we were working on some compostable things, but it's really exciting where you've taken this, Chuck, in the last probably 10 years since you and I have worked together. But it's just always fun to connect with you and kind of hear some of the fun innovation that you guys are working on over there. So really appreciate you sharing. So let's hop into this. Look, here's the thing, Chuck. You're 11 months out. Maybe 9 months now when we were recording this, up to 40 years in operations and leadership. So you're getting to the end, my friend. And so here's the question I've been holding on to you. If there was a last lecture for the next generation of manufacturing leaders, corporate leaders, what would you want them to hear? What are some hard-earned truths that you would love to pass along?
Yeah, so I think it centers around one thing, and it centers around delivering results. I mean, there's one thing that people realize is that, results matter, and results can be driven from action, but action have got to deliver results. You just don't necessarily do really good actions and not deliver results and actually have a good, good outcome. So at the end of the day, delivering results is what it's about. Also, that we go into each day to make a difference with people, make a difference with the processes that we're involved with, and make a difference with utilization of technology in the way that best suits the application. And then my last one would be to always remain constructively discontented in all that you see and all that you do. And always never accept anything is good enough, because what we get caught in a trap with is we get busy, and we don't realize that we're really not delivering anything but action. We're not delivering results. So to me, that always being constructively discontented in what I see, what I do, that I can always improve, I can always make it better, because that always, and at the end of the day, delivers the results that, either our leadership's wanting or you're wanting personally. So
yeah. Thank you for sharing. You've spoken with a true TQM person, a quality person in the factory floor, a little bit of Kaizen thrown in there. If we can improve just a little percentage every single day, it's worth it. So one thing you haven't really spoken about yet, we talked a little bit about coffee in the beginning, but in 2019, Keurig Dr Pepper, who you work for, broke ground on a state-of-the-art beverage facility in South Carolina, a project that would eventually grow to over $600 million in investment. Despite setbacks, including being built during COVID, the plant is now producing up to 1 million K-cups an hour. It is at the forefront of next-gen beverage manufacturing. You mentioned the K-rounds, and, without, we can't say manufacturing without thinking about advanced automation these days. Under your leadership as Director of Engineering and Operations, the site not only launched amidst the global uncertainty, but continues to expand and really gives a case study for scaling innovation, looking at starting a culture from scratch, even a workforce training from the ground up. And I guess my question is, as you're launching this facility, as you launched it, what became the biggest surprise in building culture, cohesion, and performance from scratch? And I really just want to paint a picture for people. I mean, imagine a slab of concrete. I mean, you are both physically starting from scratch, but to some degree, other than knowing that Keurig has a culture, a kind of a global culture, that one plant still has human beings in it, and you got to build a culture from scratch. So what have been some surprises about that? What's kind of come to light?
Yep. So I believe one of the biggest surprises that I've come away with is trying to meld the first of a kind technology, which we have here in this factory, along with an organizational strategy that relied heavily upon the standardization and reliability of that equipment. So if you think about it, if you had equipment that was standardized, was completely reliable, completely tested, then laying over an organizational strategy of high-performing team environment, it would actually have been easier to do. It's difficult when the processes, the programs, and even the culture are reliant upon that technology to support that high-performance team. The inability for the team that, to quickly meld together and to really bring that teamwork together. And then to throw in the pandemic that came along, that really hindered us from developing that high performing team type environment, while we're also trying to start up some, like I said, first of a kind technology. All of that together really, had a surprise for all of us of how difficult it was to meld those two together. I mean, for example, we never were able to really start up the equipment, build the relationships with our OEMs during the pandemic because of the social distancing and the fear of the pandemic. So a number of things there that if I had to go do it over again, there would be some changes to how we would meld both the technology as well as the cultural, I call step function improvement in both all at the same time. That was a real difficult challenge for us.
Yeah, and I just remember even being at Keurig so many years ago, and I think what some of our audience has to imagine is you've got this cutting edge coffee company, and when you were at Coke, cutting edge beverage company, and you're doing all this innovation and layering the people part in. And I think sometimes there are other organizations that are legacy organizations. They've had the culture. I've worked with them. And then you got to go back and kind of tinker with, the people piece, the behavior piece, the change piece. And it's just such a different world. That's what I always find amazing, Chuck, with you and that group there, which is just trying to drive at 100 miles an hour, two things at once: the build out, the physicality of it all, and then the people behavior piece of it all. What do you find are some myths when you're launching that high performance culture? And you've been doing it now, 40 years. And so what are some, as you've kind of gone across your career, what are some myths about launching high performance culture? What do you think, quite frankly, leaders underestimate when they're kind of handed this, job?
Yep. So I really think that a lot of people think that, oh gosh, if I can build from scratch, build a plant from scratch, build a culture from scratch, that it's always going to be easier to do. I don't have any preconceived, cultural boundaries. I don't have anything that's already preset or anything. However, I will tell you that what, the myth there is that you're still bringing together people from different organizations, people from different companies, different cultures, different experiences all at once. So like here, we hired over 200 plus people in the past, 12 to 18 months. With those 200 plus people, you think that you can just immediately sort of transcend their culture that they are coming from and put them into this new culture, and it's all just going to fit together like a puzzle. What we really found was a lot of these folks, some of them came from high-performing team environments. However, most did not. And so this was very new and difficult, to also learn along with the new technology. So you had a lot of competing things going on, and people naturally revert to what they're comfortable with. So if they were comfortable in a non-high-performing team type environment where they just were told what to do, they were set with a certain allotment of pieces or parts to make a day, and that's all they did, and then they walked away, and they didn't have any kind of desire or any kind of motivation to be part of a true high-performing team, then that's what they reverted back to. And so, it would have been easier possibly to start with a little bit more traditional people model while we ramped up the technology. And then as we began to build the technology and enable the technology to perform, bring the people and the high performing culture along with it, but to start with sort of that baseline of, high expectations and stuff, but not to really force the two together relative to a high performing team. I think that could have possibly accelerated how we got to that, sort of advanced high performing team dynamics that, that we want and that we're getting to, but it's just a little bit more difficult than we had anticipated.
I love this conversation because I always kind of frame it up as like 90% leadership, and then there's the last 10%. You can go through trainings and coaching, whatever, and I think everybody can get up to like 90%. So oftentimes when I'm going in for a workshop, conflict, communication, I'm like, this is the foundation, this is the base level. But ideally, when we get to 90%, it's always that last 10% that is the true innovation, the true leaders, Steve Jobs, you talk about all the innovative companies, that kind of thing, that is just what makes that tick. And I love that you're talking about that, which is like, to me, it's not just teams, of course, implement high performance teams. And I want to get back to that. Yep. It's like, oh, wow, there's this puzzle piece. And if we had done this first over this, that to me is that last 10%. I always call it the 10% of body fat. That's the hardest to lose at the end of your diet. It's the 10% of leadership stuff. That's the hardest. Once you have all the core foundations of communication, behavioral stuff, then it's that last 10% that makes the magic. But I want to get back to Chuck. I want to make sure the audience is and I'm kind of throwing you a little bit of a curveball, but not so much because you've been so experienced with it. Talk to me about, I think high performance teaming gets thrown around a lot because ideally everybody's on a team at work. The group is a team at work. We're all teaming. And yet you and I both know that there really is a specific type of high performance teaming and especially in manufacturing. So if you would, could you just kind of walk through maybe some of the high levels, hit up 2 or 3 points where you're like, look, when we talk high performance, when I move people from this culture over to this culture, that's high performance. What does that all look like to you?
Yeah, so it's interesting because if you get the information down to the people that are actually making decisions with that information and allow them to make those decisions and teach them what the decisions should look like, then they can make those decisions faster, quicker, usually more informed because they're seeing the real world happenings at the floor level. And to me, that's a high performing team. When the folks on the floor, the folks enabling that equipment to operate and really driving the performance of the either production line or production area, when those folks are actually have the information to do that, and they know what the goals are, they know what the expectations are, they know what the boundaries and the limitations are, they can actually do a whole lot more relative to the performance, relative to the quality, relative to those things. What we as leaders have to be able to do is build in that trust and build in that development of those folks, that they know what it is that they should do and what it is they should raise their hand and say, I'm not certain about this. It's got a risk that I've identified. I need some support. And to me, that's where you get a really high performing team, to where every level of the organization is operating at the level they're supposed to. That I'm not, as a manager or a director of engineering, is I'm having to make every little decision for those folks down on the floor, because then I'm not operating at the level I need to operate and meeting the expectations that the company has of me. So I think for me, as one, is how do we get everybody in the organization not only accountable for their level of work that they're supposed to be doing, but also understanding the expectations of it and being able to actually thrive in that kind of environment. And that's difficult for some folks, because they've come from cultures, or they come from an environment where that wasn't the case. They had to be told every day what to do, how to do it. And so to me, those are the kind of things that really drive a different organization and a different level of performance. And we've seen it, in different industries. I mean, I've visited Procter & Gamble, I've visited Campbell Soup, I've visited a lot of different organizations where they had those kind of, that kind of setup. And it really, really not only drives engagement of the team, but it drives performance of the factories.
Yeah, I want to get to engagement in a minute. I always try to reference people, at the very least, whatever Chuck just said. Go watch that scene in Apollo 13 where they throw all the equipment on the thing. They got the smartest people in the world around that table, and they say, figure it out.
Yep.
To me, is like, if you had to boil it down into a soup, it would be like that scene where they go, look, here's the problem, here's the challenge, here's the goal, right? We got to get more oxygen into the thing. Here's the tools you have. Let me know when you're completed. So I'm always reminded about that. When we talk engagement, you're working a lot with this new generation, right? And you've got a workforce raised on smartphones and instant answers, which could be frustrating in a teaming atmosphere, I would imagine. And often, sometimes these systems, especially the cultural systems, are built like they're operating in 1995. What do you find your 20-somethings, maybe some 30-somethings in age, what are the new non-negotiables when designing work environments for the digital native employees?
Yep. So at the end of the day, the goals still have to be clear and achievable. So, the folks, whether they're working digitally, whether they're working off of whiteboards, whether they're working off of the, screens that show the performance or whatever, the goals have to be clear. And everyone needs to know what winning means and what the rules are to win. It doesn't matter if it's digital, it doesn't matter which type of means of communication or which type of means of tracking. It's got to be clear and it's got to be achievable. Then the other one is the vision has to be clear of where do we want to be and where do we want to go and what does our trend look like. And when you start to think about this, is most people that work in manufacturing, if they know what winning means and they know what that winning the day means, a lot of times they can achieve that without a whole lot of leadership, or a whole lot of management, or a whole lot of interface with other. They know what it means to win. That's really clear and really easy. The sort of the paradox that I've used around here is we might win or lose an inning, but we haven't lost the ball game. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about 9 innings of baseball, you might lose the first 3, 5, 6, 7 innings or whatever, but still are able to win the game at the end of the day. And that's what people really look for is, am I winning and what's in it for me? So.
Yeah. I'm often reminded of a Keurig plant manager. I remember, and I share this in a lot of my workshops too, which I remember him saying, look, I try and get 1 or 2 text messages out the door on Friday afternoon, just telling my staff, and I pick one or two and I say, hey, you really did that roasting right, or you really clean, I was very proud of the 5, star point rolls so to me, I think we sometimes get confused that it needs to be big grand gestures. And I really like what you're saying. It lines up with a lot of the current science right now about clear goal setting, accountability, trust, and making sure that you have their back too. And I think we try and throw this Gen Y, Z, and Alpha generation kind of other concepts, happy hours and ping pong tables and stuff. And that's not really what they're looking for. And so I appreciate you kind of sharing that with us. So, well, one of the last questions, Chuck, then we're going to go into a lightning round. And it does kind of align with this. Everybody wants results. And you've been saying that all interview long, especially the C-suite and shareholders. And they want them fast these days, probably even faster. How do you lead when the optics demand speed, or what one of our mentors, Deb Mackin, might call tyranny of the urgent, with the truth around patience? And right, and you've had to do that in particular with the build out of the factory and kind of measuring hey, we want this faster. Obviously, we're losing the ability to make cake cups and things as the thing. But how do you measure that? How do you balance that, especially at a senior leader level?
Yep. So, it sort of goes back to the agile approach and using sprints to show progress and wins. When you can show small wins, you begin to build momentum. And in my experience, momentum is actually better for sustainable results than speed. Speed is great, but momentum is what really drives that long-term sustainable result at the end of the day. Speed gets you started quicker, but momentum continues the effort. And, for me, it's about showing those wins early. It's typically in, manufacturing and supply chain means addressing some immediate needs that normally revolve around communication, where communication is timely and consistent and relative to the needs of the stakeholders. They feel like there's actual progress being made and they feel like there's momentum being gained. And so to me that, when things are in high demand, speed is of the essence and stuff, but there's this element of high level of communication, high level of momentum, and those are the things that actually drive the end result of sustainable results.
I love that piece, and there's definitely a book somewhere in that, speed versus momentum. Something that maybe your next adventure. I don't know. Okay, so Chuck, speed round, lightning round here. We call this one the switch. What's a leadership belief you once held on to that you eventually outgrew?
So it's probably around everyone has their unique strengths and we should leverage those versus thinking everyone should automatically behave, think, and perform the same. I really believe the diversity of team members is what drives greater innovation, solutioning, and ultimately the results. I have come to realize too quickly that if the world was full of engineers like myself, that it would just tip over to one side. And so I think the diversity and understanding that all of these folks have different strengths and how do we actually leverage those? Yep.
Great. All right. Next one is the leadership anchor. When the work gets hard, fast, loud, noisy, what's your anchor? What's your leadership anchor? What principle, practice, or mindset brings you back to center?
Yep. So as leaders at all times, we should bring calmness to chaos. To me, it's all about how do you get people to calm down, to make the right decisions. It's not about decreasing the energy or the urgency. It's about making sure the team can think clearly, identify the risks and opportunities, and then put the correct action plans in by taking that chaos and reducing it down to a level of calmness that you can do that.
Great. All right, my friend, as we wrap up, we always close with what we call read, listen, eat. What are you reading right now? What's on your bedstand? What's on your porch? What are you listening to? What's a podcast, playlist, audiobook you might recommend? And what's something you've eaten or cooked recently that totally hit the spot?
Yeah, so currently reading a book by John Maxwell called Leading in Tough Times. There's no mystery right now that Keurig, this site is going through some tough times trying to get stood up. So that was a really, really good read. As far as listening, I'm listening to a Audible book called Train Your Empathy by Patrick King. And this one is interesting because most engineers, myself included, aren't very empathetic. We don't have a lot of empathy, and my wife reminds me of that all the time. But I think it's really, really good to not only focus on the professional side, but also the personal side of development. And then lastly, relative to eat, we recently purchased a Blackstone, and man, I'll tell you what, enjoying some good old smash burgers on that Blackstone has been something of a kind right there.
Yeah. And smash burgers are absolutely on point with the Blackstone, and also stir fry. Transform your stir fry, because we're all trying to do it on the oven, stovetop. But once you get on that Blackstone, it's a different world.
Different world. Yeah.
All right, Chuck, my friend, thank you so much. It's been fun. Great to connect with you. I really appreciate you joining us today.
All right. Thanks so much, Matt. Talk to you soon.
All right, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview with Chuck. Such a smart guy. Unfortunately, we're going to lose him to probably retirement in the next couple of months. So we got these legacy players that are just going to start to go away. But it was so great to connect with him and hear about all his experience and really pass down some of those leadership tips to maybe the next generation. I very much hope so. So we'll be dropping this episode in the next couple of weeks to our listeners. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe and share. That's always helpful for us over here on the podcast side of things. This episode will be available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and more. For more information about the show and the thoughts that are shared here, go over to www.harringtonbrands.com. And as always, take what you've heard, make it your own, and apply it directly.